All right, good morning. Welcome back to the Wake Up Call. Right about now, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at Extreme 104 SVG. I want to say good morning to our guest this morning. Good morning to Jomo Thomas. He's an attorney and former Speaker of the House. Good morning, Jomo. How are you?
Not bad
Not
at
bad
all,
at all.
Mr.
How are things on your side? Is that rain I'm hearing?
No,
No.
Oh, okay. So it's just a little bit of background noise. How are you this morning?
I'm doing
I'm doing
well.
well.
Okay. So this morning we're gonna get a bit of update on the CJ Weeks case. Earlier this year, he would have passed away from an incident that happened on the Leeward side. Maybe if you can just briefly go over what transpired earlier this year, just to remind folks of what we're talking about.
Right.
Right.
I
I
must say,
must say,
I am
I am
speaking.
speaking.
I'm getting
I'm
a
getting a
feedback.
feedback.
I'm not
I'm not
sure.
sure.
You're getting a feedback. Uh, do you have like headphones you want to put on? Or I'm not sure if that would help.
But
But
basically,
basically,
Hmm.
um,
um,
the
the
matter with
matter with
CJ
CJ
Weeks
Weeke'S
has to do
has to
with
do
an
with an
incident
incident
that
that
occurred
occurred
on
on
February
February
2022.
2022.
Hmm.
Listeners may
Listeners may
recall
recall
Mr. Weeks
the
was
week was
riding a
riding a
bike,
bike,
and
and
apparently the
apparently the
police put
police
out
put
an
out an
alert,
alert,
and
and
he
he
was
was
chased,
chased,
I think,
I
by
think, by
police
police
officers
officers
who
who
were
were
in the Hotels police station. And CJ rode the bike in down towards Redden Hill in over 20 Hill, and I guess was riding
riding
towards
towards
Finiston.
Finiston.
He
He
got to
got
the
to the
top
top
of
of
the
the
hill
hill
in
in
the
the
left,
left,
and
and
went
went
down a
down the
road
road
that
that
has been
has
in a
been.
state of disrepair. And the police were in hot pursuit of him, and the, he went down the road, the police vehicle went behind him, and as he told his mom in the hours after the incident before he died, and he died at 3 or 4 days after, he told his mom one of the police vehicle was on top of him. So the police, in my estimation, literally chased CJ Weeks to his death. And listeners may recall that immediately after that incident, it was said by the Prime Minister that there would be a coroner's inquest. And then the Commissioner of Police, the Honorable Colin John, said as well that, well, this incident happened, there's going to be a coroner's inquest. And I remember speaking about it on another radio station, and that's when the Honorable Commissioner said there's going to be a coroner's inquest. And I, in turn, said, well, not so fast. We don't get to a coroner's inquest simply because somebody dies by an official or someone who's operating under the color of law, as in this case, a police officer. What you need to do is to do an investigation, turn the file over to the Director of Public Prosecution, and let the Director of Public Prosecution or that office make a decision whether criminal liability arises. And if it was my feeling then, and it continues to be my feeling, that at a minimum, the police who chased CJ to his death should have been charged with, at a minimum, manslaughter or reckless endangerment or some other such charge. So the matter, once I made that comment about the need for the Director of Public Prosecution to look at it, I think it was announced by the Commissioner that the file had been sent to the Director of Public Prosecution. And sometime earlier in this month, the Director of Public Prosecution made a decision. The Director of Public Prosecution announced that after an exhaustive investigation, her office did not think that criminal liability arises. She says the investigation seemed to indicate that what we need in St. Vincent were more road hazard signs. And she said that those should be erected nationwide. And then, in a final salvo, she says the matter has attracted much attention. Unsettling sentiments have been expressed and anti police rhetoric of several members of the public seem to have been spurred on by perceived injustice and a host of misinformation laced with propaganda. So she seems to think that what much of what is in the public domain and the public discourse was laced with misinformation, misinformation laced with propaganda. So that's where we are in terms of trying to bring you up to date. So the matter has been sent to a coroner, or would be sent to a coroner for the coroner to pronounce. Um, One of the things of significance for me when I saw this report was that the director of public prosecution already said that no criminal liability arise. So the question is now, why send it to a coroner? Because the director of public prosecution is an independent constitutional office. The
Hmm.
office of the of public prosecution can decide to initiate and to stop at any time a criminal investigation, a criminal trial. You can stop it even if it's it's going on. You can stop it. You can nolly prosecutors. That's the word that's was made popular over the last 10 years or so.
Hmm.
So why send it to a coroner if this is just a formality? Because if the and we well know that even if a coroner finds that this was not a case of death by misadventure, there were criminal liability should arise. Let's say the coroner says, coroner's inquest concludes that yes, there's sufficient evidence to try this possible manslaughter. Even so, the director of public prosecution does not have to um, institute the process that would lead to a trial. The director of public prosecution can say, forget it, no trial.
Hmm.
We have considered this, we don't feel. So I thought it was inappropriate. And I spoke with a number of my colleagues across the region, including people who happen to be director of public prosecutions. And they thought it was kind of funny that a pronouncement is made if the matter is going to be sent to a director, to a coroner's inquest. Um, Many of my colleagues were of the view that even if this is the view of the director of public prosecution, no such pronouncement should have been made. The matter should have simply been sent to a coroner, and then, however the coroner decided, the director of public prosecution still had the final say as to whether to prosecute if they ruled that there should be prosecution. But to, as one colleague said to me, it was rather strange and odd that that would be
Hmm.
done. But
In what
this is,
forum was it said by the DPP?
excuse me?
In what forum
No, no,
was it?
no. This was, I was shopping. Um, I was opinion shopping. So I spoke to a number of senior attorneys, including two directors of public prosecution across the region, and one of them, one very high official, legal mind, did say thought it was strange or odd that that would be said, even as the case goes to a coroner's inquest.
Okay. So as it goes to the coroner's inquest, what are the possibilities for the outcome?
Well, a coroner's inquest allows for the hearing of the evidence. It allows for um, questioning of the witnesses, and then they deliberate much like how they deliberate in a criminal trial or in a civil trial. They deliberate and they come to a conclusion. If they think there's liability, if they, in this case, if they think that criminal liability arises, they can say yes, we believe that, and they can say what they think the charge should be. So a coroner inquest could conclude that someone could be charged for, let's say, manslaughter or whatever. But as I said, even if they were to do that, the ultimate authority as to whether to bring the trial would be with the director of public prosecution. And that is why many of my colleagues thought it was strange that the director would say no criminal liability arises, and then, but the matter goes to a coroner's inquest, because the law having to do with coroner's inquest basically says that once someone um, is killed by a state authority or somebody working under the color of law, a police officer, some other state official, that a coroner's inquest should determine it if there's not sufficient evidence to come to a conclusion. I give you an example,
Uh-huh.
um, um, and I may be able to offer you two examples. Uh, One was back early in, I think it might have been 2002 or 2003, when former Commissioner of Prisons Rodriguez was implicated in the death of uh, a prisoner. The prisoner was shot, and a coroner's inquest was started, and the Honorable Director of Public Prosecution then, Roger Gaspard, he thought, well, and said, well, I don't care what you all want to do here in terms of that coroner's inquest, but I think there's sufficient evidence to try this man. And Rodriguez didn't was in fact tried. He was found not guilty, but he was tried because that was the view of the then sitting director of public prosecution. He was literally drummed out of here. But he's the status of the man, the gravitas of the man, and his opinion is reflected in the fact that he moved on. He's a Trinidadian, and he moved on to be director of public prosecution in Trinidad, and he remains director of public prosecution in Trinidad for more than a decade now. So Roger Gaspard is a man of some legal in and intellectual integrity. So that was that decision then. And then there was the decision which might have gone under the radar, but there was a decision of the Honorable Director of Public Prosecution, Colin Williams, when many of us recall when the wall fell, what was popularly known as the Jack Wall at what is that
Rathamel.
at Ratto Mill, when
Mm-hmm.
that wall fell, and that lady was unfortunately buried in the tons of rubble.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the coroner's inquest felt that the contractor should have been charged, and the director of public prosecution then felt, well, which contractor should be charged? Because apparently in that matter, there was a contractor and then there was a subcontractor. So it was not clear who should have been charged. And the decision was made not to charge anyone. And a number of people were quite upset by that. But those were the decisions those are two examples that I can offer where one director felt that a trial should go on separate and apart from the coroner's inquest, or before the coroner's inquest, or in spite of the coroner's inquest, and another one thinking that no, we don't. I don't think I have enough information here upon which I can charge someone for a criminal offense. So that's where that is.
All right. Permit me to ask, you quoted, um, correct me if I'm wrong, you quoted the DPP as saying that there's a bit of misinformation with regards to what the public knows versus what is documented, or what would have
Right,
come from investigations. That's what you
right.
said, right?
Well,
But can
she
you give
says,
me an idea? Uh-huh.
she says, this matter has attracted much publicity.
Uh-huh.
Unsettling sentiments have been expressed, and anti-police rhetoric of several members of the public seem to have been spurred on by perceived injustice and a host of misinformation laced with propaganda.
What is the misinformation? Can you tell us?
Well, I couldn't say. I mean, this is the perception of the learned director of public prosecution. I guess she, probably listening to what was said on the case, she felt much of it was propagandistic and laced with misinformation. But I don't know which misinformation. I think, you see, a lot of times state authorities always do this. They take a long time to make decisions, and then when people go with the information that they know, they say that it's misinformation, or if only. You recall the incident with Mr. John when Mr. John was shot? The prime
Uh-huh.
minister came on early and said, well, if only people know the full story, they would hold.
Right, right, right.
But if you give the full story, uh, an objective assessment of what the full story is. Much of the misinformation that you claim people are running with, they would not run with. It's when things occur in the dark and state authorities attempt to keep it in the dark that people would go with what they hear, what their neighbors say, what their friends said. And sunlight is the best disinfectant there is. So you want to lay it out there and let people come to their own conclusions as to what they see it's happening. But a lot of time you don't have transparency, you don't have openness, and people are left to speak based on what they know.
Right. And based on what people say, as you
Yeah.
rightly said. But you were quoting and you were reading from a document. Where did the DPP say this? Was it said on radio? Was it said on television? Was it said on a
No,
phone
it was a
call?
memorandum that was sent to the police officer, to the police commissioner, which was shared with us. Because
Oh,
we are attorneys for the estate of CJ Weeks.
right.
So they felt compelled to share with us.
So is this information, it was not shared to the general public? You are just sharing it on behalf
No,
of
it
the
doesn't share with the general public. I just share it. I know they probably would be upset with me for sharing it, but um,
upset now or are already upset.
well, state authorities are always upset with Jomo Thomas for one reason or the other.
I wonder why, Jomo. I wonder why.
Because I am in the I am a tongue crier.
Hmm.
As the Jamaican song.
Okay, there's a little bit of okay, you're back now. Hello?
Hello,
Hi?
are you asking me something?
It's a little thing, it's cutting out a little bit there, but if you just continue speaking, let me see if we on track. All right, we're good
Oh
now?
yeah, well basically that's what I wanted to say. If you have a question for me, I'll answer. But
Right. But it cut out a little bit there. I wasn't hearing you for a
oh no, I am
second.
here.
All right. So somebody is asking, so what is the next course of action? So it's
Well, the
going
next
off the
point of
discharge
action,
request. So we just
the
have to
next
sit on
point of
it.
action is that we intend to bring a civil claim on behalf of the estate of CJ Weeks. We intend to bring a claim, and we intend to ground that claim in assault, battery, negligence, and
Hmm.
based on the action of the police officer, which in our estimation led to CJ Weeks' death. That would go to trial, and then the evidence would come forward, the witnesses would come forward, and a judge would make a decision as to whether the attorney general and the officers involved would be found liable or not. Interestingly,
Where is that
after
officer?
the, excuse me,
Where is that officer?
well, we don't know. That's the point I was going to make. Interestingly enough, when when we got notice that the director of public prosecution made a decision which says that no criminal liability arose, we wrote to the commissioner of police asking him, saying, in light of the decision of the director, we are asking you to reveal the names of the officers who were in the vehicle that was involved in the incident that led to CJ's death. And we got a very quick response from the commissioner of police asking me to declare which legal authority, on which legal authority I am grounding my request for the release of the names. So it's rather laughable because, for one thing, the demands of justice requires that the names be released. And if he does not release the names, we go to the court and we ask the court um, to command him to release the names based on discovery. So I'm not so sure what game he intends to play, but we know the law and we know the requirements of the law. And if it takes us to do what he's asking us to do, we do it. But we would get the names. There's no doubt about that.
What purpose would it serve him releasing the names of the police officers?
Well, to have them as defendants, to have one or more of them as defendants. So we know that, I mean, the law allows us now to simply bring the claim for CJ's estate against the Attorney General, who is the official who represents the state, and the Commissioner of Police. We can bring that claim, and there's legal authority that establishes that we could bring a claim against the Commissioners of Police as the head of the constabulary. We could do that. But
Mhm.
we thought it would be proper to ask him for the names, and he has said that he's not releasing the names, which shows how much these guys are concerned about transparency and so on and so forth. But that's where we are.
Do you think that not releasing the names is a means of protecting? Because you said the DPP said there's a bit of misinformation,
You know,
which to me sounds like okay, the public will be very angry, and if they go ahead and release the names based on what they know, somebody might say or do something. Do you think it's a form of
no, no, no,
protection?
nobody don't do anything to police officers in St. Vincent. People are afraid of police officers. Police officers beat young men and women every day in St. Vincent. In fact, I saw a piece on Eyewitness News. I haven't read it yet. I saw the headline where a man is accused, a man from Clare Valley, I think, is accusing the police of beating him into unconsciousness, and they had to take seawater to revive him. So people, I know I have clients of police knock out their teeth, police shoot them, nothing happens. So it can be a case to say that people take retaliatory action against police officers, because I don't know of any instant where that has happened in at least in the last 18 years since I've been back here, having lived abroad for some time.
Hmm.
Nobody does anything to police officers. Police officers are just many of them are very brutal, and
Hmm.
nothing happens.
Jomo, based on what you know, how confident are you that I don't want to say justice will prevail, but how confident are you in the outcome for this, for the entire case?
Well, we don't have any control. I mean, when you bring a claim before the court, you don't have any control against how the court would rule.
Hmm.
Um, but in a civil, whereas in a criminal case, the legalist standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil claim, which we are going to bring, the standard is by a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, on the scale, let's see, is it tilting one way or the other? So the standard in a civil case is lower, and we believe that there's sufficient evidence. I mean, there are witnesses who said that that police vehicle was right up on the CJ when he was riding. In the public domain, we have pictures of one of the police officers, the female police officer on the scene, who was there with her hands on her head as if to say, "What the hell did we just do?" So there's a lot of um, direct and circumstantial evidence which we think would be sufficient to ground the claim in at least negligence, because they have a duty of care to CJ as they do to every other citizen of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This way to protect and serve. And evidently, they on that morning, because we have to remember, at worst, the most CJ could have been charged with is a traffic offense, which is not even a criminal offense.
Hmm.
So to chase him to his death, simply because, let us assume that he was driving, he was joyriding, and he didn't have a permit, which he had, the worst he could have been charged with is a traffic offense. For what? You might have charged him a few $100s. So the response of the police was not proportionate to the gravity of what had been occurring at that time.
Okay. I think this is gonna be maybe my final question this morning. You read something about the DPP saying more road hazard signs. If you could just reread that section there for me.
Well, what one of the things that was said is that um, the the incident highlight the need for more road hazard signs to be erected nationwide. I don't know what that would have done or how it would have saved CJ's life. Maybe they're saying if there was a hazard sign, that CJ might have gone right instead of going left. But the truth of the matter is that that road is a road. The road simply went into disrepair. The government has not fixed the road for years, and as the water keeps running off the road, it has gone into disrepair. So when CJ rode over there, the road became impassable. Um, so while CJ might have been able to get through, the vehicle could not get through. And what we know is that the vehicle, if we had to take CJ's words to his mother, dying declaration to his mother as any indication, CJ said that there was a time when the vehicle was on top of him. It is instructive, I think, from an evidence-free standpoint, that the police never left the vehicle there so that any investigation can take place. The police removed the vehicle almost immediately, and has my information is that they've already fixed it because the wheel literally almost came off. Um, and they also tampered with the bike, which our information, quite reliable information from the parents, is that they tampered with the bike that CJ was riding. So I don't know what the road hazard signs would say or do, but that's the recommendation of the learn director.
Why do you say learn the director?
Well, that's the way we describe them in the court. So, for example, you may see a judge may say the learned attorney general or the learned director of public prosecution or learned counsel, um, uh, Linton Lewis, or learned counsel Jomo Thomas. That's the way they refer to you.
Oh, so it's not a bad thing, right? It's not like,
No,
you
no,
know,
no, no, no.
a, um, a
It is
high
not a
class
bad thing
position.
to say that someone is learned if the person is learned.
Okay, just making sure in between there. Um, I don't think I have any further questions. I don't know if the general public. I mean, I would have read a question from somebody on the live there. But is there anything else that you want to
No, 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 no.
share with us?
I am normally at your service. So if you ask me questions, I would answer.
I know.
But once I get past the basics, I don't. There's very little else I have to say. I want to say.
What possibility is there of it being an accident and they might have just removed him from the area in an improper manner that might have may or may not have led to his death?
Well, we don't do a lot of that here, but in bigger countries, when there's an accident, it's very rare that people will simply take you and throw you in a vehicle and take you to the hospital. They may wait for the arrival of an emergency vehicle because, for one thing, the trained persons would want to um, move you or lift you in a way that may not aggravate any kind of injuries which you might have. Here in St. Vincent, once you get in an accident, you can't move, which is not, it's a good Samaritan act. Let's get Jomo to the hospital as quickly as possible. And sometimes in doing that, I am sure it must have happened in the past. Many of us in our attempt to do good may well aggravate a situation. So, but I can't speak to that as to whether CJ's injuries. I don't think he did have a spinal injury,
Hmm.
but I can't speak to whether the attempt to move him was an aggravating feature of it.
What about the autopsy report? What did they say was the cause of death?
Trauma.
Trauma.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, he flew off the bike, and then there was this vehicle again. Based on what he told him, the vehicle was sitting on him.
How are the parents doing?
They're very distraught. They were particularly distraught last week when they heard of this information. Well, once I got it, I shared it with them.
Hmm.
You know, they I know the father. I said, it's really sad.
Right.
I feel for them like I feel for any other family who has had a loss as tragic and as unfortunate and uncalled for as this one.
How far are they willing to go?
Well, they're willing to. We have outlined to them what next can be done, and we are willing to pursue the civil claim as best we can. And we hope that the court would see with us and award some kind of damages to the estate of CJ. It cannot bring him back, but I'm sure the parents had all kind of cost related to his care and his burial, and if they could begin to recoup some of that, that may not be a bad thing. Certainly, there's no way it can compensate them for the loss, but I'm sure if at the end of the day they get $1 or $5, which help them to recoup some of the costs um, connected to the internment of CJ. I think that it's small consolation, but it's some.
All right. Okay. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up? Because we've been in it.
Oh, no, no. I have said what I wanted to say, and I have answered what you asked me.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
No
We'll
problem.
keep in touch with any more updates on this case. Or when is the coroner's inquest set to begin?
It has not been yet been announced.
Okay. So that's the next step. Waiting for what
Yeah,
date,
what the
and then
coroner's inquest would say.
the results from that, and then we take it from there.
Yeah.
All right. Hopefully, it
Okay.
doesn't go on for an extended period of time, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, we have a backlog of these things. There are many, many um, instances in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where people have been killed by in circumstances where state individuals, officials are involved, and that somebody reminded me recently that the the coroner's inquest having to do with Mr. White, the gentleman you may recall, Mr. White from Union Island, who had gone on that ship and ended up being
Yeah.
shot and killed. There has
Abdul
been that
Father.
coroner's inquest has not yet completed, and
Will
I'm
it
sure
ever be completed?
excuse me,
That happened in 2012 or 2013.
um, it may be
Thereabout.
thereabout close to
Yeah.
10 years, if not more now.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy, people may recall the guy who was killed down in the guy in the van who was killed down in, was it, Mount Twin on that road. There has, I don't know of any coroner's inquest that has taken place. There are a number of incidents that have resulted, and we haven't had yet a coroner's inquest. So they are rather slow in doing them. But when you don't do them, it is as if, particularly if somebody of some notoriety is involved, the understanding is okay, he was a criminal, police shot him, so what? But the
Really.
law requires that a coroner's inquest be done, but rarely do we see these happen.
What was the reason for the
Although I
back?
think that in recent times, though, I must admit that the prime minister has been making the point that these coroner's inquests need to get on with doing them and getting them out of the way. But again, I think that has to do with the fact that there are people who are now calling for coroner's inquests.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
What is the reason for the backlog, or what are the reasons? This is my last question now.
I,
Last one. Last one.
I couldn't say.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that the seat is priority. I don't think the seat is important.
Oh,
So unless people are pushing for it, they simply just go to sleep. Once you push for it, you hear the talk. Okay, let's get it done.
okay.
Um,
So that's our responsibility as the general public to
yeah,
say,
I think the people need to push. I think that the family for the officer, remember the officer who was killed at Lomans. Um,
yes.
I can't remember his name now. Very pleasant officer. Um,
Chambers, was it Chambers?
Chambers,
Was Lewis, Gleason
Corporal
Lewis?
Chambers.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's going on now. Or it's just about completed. But again,
Yeah.
that's because of the insistence of the family and so on in terms of
Well,
getting it done.
there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Jomo. Have a wonderful day.
Do likewise. Take care. All the
All
best to
right.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.